time is running, and as long as it's sunny outside, I think it's also in your interest to get finished as soon as possible. So what we're doing this afternoon is we're going to do basically three topics. First, I'll give you an overview of how to read and write papers. This won't take a long time because I would like you to read the three papers that you got. Please read them from your iPads or computers and so on. We will have time. I would give time approximately 45 minutes maximum, okay, that you read the papers. I would prefer only half an hour so we can discuss more. And keep in mind these questions here, okay? What kind of research questions were raised in all three of these papers? What were the aims? Were the aims clearly written? Okay, were the aims clearly written in all of these papers? Were hypotheses raised? Were the methods appropriate to answer the questions? And how did the authors analyze their data? Okay, this is important. So the aim of this afternoon is for you to understand how to critically read a paper based on these 5 questions. Number 2 is, so first I'll give you a little background of how to read and also write papers. Secondly, you read the papers, and thirdly, we discuss them, okay? How you see these papers organized. Okay, good. Let's get going. I repeat again, when you read a paper, please keep always a pen, a marker in your hand. Read it and write while you're reading. Take notes. This will help you identify what the paper and sections thereof were about. Use a reference program. I already told you. When you read papers, take notes, but also about the paper. So keep the paper tracked. And as I said, I personally use EndNote. I gave you the link here where you can find EndNote. It's just, I don't get any money of it, but I would recommend EndNote. There's Reference Manager and so on as well. So if you try to keep the research well organized, EndNote I think is a good program. It keeps all information of the paper, including abstract, keywords. You can take notes and you can write that down. It also gets the DOI stored, so you can click on the DOI, and if you're linked to PubMed or any other network, you get immediate access to the PDF of these papers. Something else that I forgot to tell you, if you get papers, for example, the paper on the right bottom is published in 1971. It's rare that these papers are online now. And it's even more rare that you will find yourself in a library, right? In my times, I'm an old guy. In my times, I went to the library and we had books and journals, and we photocopied them and so on. These times are over now, but nevertheless, if you have a chance to get to the library, then you get hold of these books perhaps. If not, there's also, what I personally do is I go into Google Scholar and look for these old papers. I found yesterday evening, obviously I wasn't in the library at 10 o'clock in the evening, I was at home and I still could find the paper published in 1971 on Google Scholar. There is ResearchGate. Who knows about ResearchGate? Who does not know about ResearchGate? Okay, so ResearchGate, if you Google that, it's like Facebook for scientists. ResearchGate, and it doesn't cost anything. You can look, and if you are, I think it's open even for everybody, and you can find on ResearchGate probably most of the scientists right now, and most of these have a dear interest in publishing, in posting their papers also online. So if you don't find them via the official websites, most often you get also the PDFs at ResearchGate. Now, if all of these options fail, you can simply write the authors. Write them an email and say, I'm interested, I'm flabbergasted about your fantastic research. Please send me a PDF, okay? And they will love it. They will just send you the PDF as soon as they can. No, honestly, I think this is those are the ways that you get your research papers pretty simple. If you haven't done it anyway, these are the suggestions that I propose. Okay, so guidelines how to read research papers. Look for the intellectual plot line of the paper. A paper is like a house, okay, like a building. Look at this room here. We have a solid floor. We've got pillars that support the upper floor. There's logic behind, because the guys that live upstairs don't want to tumble downstairs, okay? So these pillars have a function, and the pillars can only be steady because the foundation is steady and can carry the pillars. It's an architecture. And now let's think of a scientific paper as a masterpiece of architecture. Every paragraph is constructed like a house. Every paper is constructed like a house. Now, the title of a paper is, and this is something when you write and when you read, the same thing. The title of the paper is the shortest summary of the most important finding of the study. There are good titles, there are bad titles. A good title would be, as I said, what's the shortest way to communicate the most important finding of the study that you conducted. Then by just reading the title, you know what the paper is about. For example, aspirin can reduce cancer. For example, that's a statement, okay? Now you know whether it's right or wrong is a different thing, but this is a title, and this attracts your interest, okay? Then in the abstract, then you read a bit more. Another way of writing a title would be effect of, or the role of aspirin in preventing cancer. Okay? It's just about the role, but if you write a paper, don't say the role of something in this or implications of that and that. Just tell the result. Okay? Tell the result of your study. What was the result of your study? And that's basically in the title. That's a very good way to write informative papers. The principle in all scientific papers should be, it's very, very clear, and we understand it when we say KISS. KISS stands for keep it short and simple. Okay? And unmistakably simple and clear. Okay? That's very easy. So the title should be short and clear. The result of your study. Abstract, same thing. Result of your study. Where you come from, what are the results, what are the implications. Now, if we talk about every section, a section is like the anatomy of a human or any animal. Something that gets in, something that gets processed, something that gets assimilated, and something that gets out of the body again. And an introduction is the something that gets into your body. Something that, I said before, is the funnel that leads the uninitiated reader to your subject, to your question. Okay? What do the researchers want to find out? What is the research question? What is the aim? What is the hypothesis? And this needs to be constructed. Now, every research paragraph has 3 topics. A research paragraph should be constructed with a general statement as the first sentence. Then you break this general statement up into more details in the other sentences. And the last sentence of a paragraph should be the conclusion, what we learned in this paragraph. Okay? Does it make sense? Very logically constructed. General statement. Break it down, provide substance, provide evidence through other studies that the statement is substantiated by previous knowledge, and then a conclusion. Now, this conclusion can be a question. It can be a formal statement, but it should round up the paragraph. Okay? The next paragraph deals with a different scope, but is constructed in a very similar way. Okay? So when we start with the introduction is you need to lead the uninitiated reader to get to understand what you're interested in, what the scientific question that you're interested in is about. Okay? So you go from this broad information, you narrow it down, you narrow it down, you narrow it down. Each step of narrowing it down leads to a scientific problem, to the questions that you address in your paper. And this is something that you should read, and we practice that in the afternoon with the papers that you're going to read. Okay? Now, then you already ask yourself the problem that the authors identified. This is how you read the paper. The problems that the authors identified, are these problems important for the field of interest that you're reading about? Or have these problems already been addressed? Is the author, for example, revisiting some knowledge or re-chewing the same problem that has been already published? So is he already repeating knowledge? Or is it really new? So how are the researchers investigating this problem? How appropriate and adequate are the methods to the task? Now, if the problem has been identified, you need to understand what you suggest, by which method you will increase the knowledge. and how you are going to solve the problem that has been identified in the introduction. Then you need to ask yourself, if they are successful in solving the problem, can they advance the knowledge in the field? Is there potential that they can advance the knowledge? If so, how? If no, why not? And how well do researchers place the findings within the context of ongoing scholarly inquiry about this topic? This means already, if you have a case study, and this case study remains a case study, it's nice. If you know that in Athens there are 100 people that do something, it's great to know. Okay? But what does it mean for the world? What does it mean for the world of science in general? Is the finding any different from the finding that has been done in Messina or in Cracovia or I don't know where? Okay? Is that different, or is that the same? So put your knowledge into perspective. Why is that important? Why is it important to examine how different you find? For example, let's make one example here. Bone fracture. Clavicle, okay, this is one of the most fractured bone in the human body. You have got a full fracture of the clavicle, and how long does it take to heal until the callus is formed? In Athens, in Messina, in the rest of Europe. Is that an important question? If you were to write a paper and you say, I'd like to contribute to the general knowledge of how a clavicle fracture heals up, or is it all known anyway? It's known already. Good. Is there anything that is not known? You don't know. Okay.
We don't know the unknown. The indications made for operating treatment, well, they are kind of precise, but there are still some cases where they're known.
Okay.
Is sufficient enough. We can try it.
Okay. Let's get one step before again. If we say it's already known, can we say that it doesn't matter whether you're Greek, whether you're Serbian, whether you're Irish, whether you're Swedish or Portuguese, your clavicle, if it's broken, will heal in what, let's say, one month or something like this. Can we agree?
We do research in different ethnicities like Afro-American, African, Asian. Maybe there might be some kind of suggestion, but still.
But this is common knowledge now, let's say, okay? Why is it common knowledge? Because this has been done over and over again, and this has been reported over and over again. Okay? So the implications are that if you're Greek or Finnish, it doesn't matter. Your clavicle will heal up in 1 month, for example. Okay? This puts that into perspective. Now, this is a very simple, already known example. But if something is, if there is perhaps evidence that for example, now, if you drink alcohol, I always use, I don't know why, but I always use these examples. But if you're from southern China, and you're from, let's say, Europe, okay, and you drink and drink and drink and drink, what is the likelihood that the people get drunk before when you're Chinese?
Alcoholic hydrogenosis.
Mm-hmm.
It's in people of Asia. It's little amount than in Europe.
Exactly.
Our people is more trained.
That's right. That's right. Same with milk. Same with milk, for example. So there is, human beings are not alike in all over the world. With the clavicle, it's fine, but when we go to the enzymes, then we have got differences with the enzymes. So we cannot generalize. For example, the laws that apply to Europe. If you drink, I don't know what's the limit now, even in Austria, but probably 0.5 per mils, 0.3, I don't know. This may be perhaps even too high if you were in China. So we cannot generalize it. We need to discuss what is the difference among the human species. For the bone fracture, it doesn't matter, but for other things, it doesn't matter. So if you find something, you need to put that into the context of ongoing scholarly inquiry about this topic. Okay? Even if you think that this is just your own cohort study. Put that into perspective. What does it mean? Then look at the organization of the article. Can you find answers to the above questions quickly and easily? Okay, this comes back to the organization, to the architecture of the article that I was talking about. Can you trace the logic of investigation consistently from the opening paragraph to the conclusion? Now, this is important. When you read an article, you said in the morning that you read the title, you read the abstract, and then you decide whether it's important, whether it's good to read. Okay? But this is good logic, right? Because if you've got a boring title, okay, you skip it. If you have a boring title and a boring abstract, no. Okay? So this is something, it's a little bit of again, there are good and bad architects, but there's also good writers and poor writers. If you're a good writer, then you attract the attention based on the signs that you generate. Most important finding, title. Show what is, what you really found and what you're going to discuss is the first paragraph of the discussion. The first sentence of the discussion, of the interpretation of the data, summarizes, is what I call punchline. Okay? It's something that you tell the people exactly what they need to learn. This study shows that, boom, boom, boom. You don't interpret, you just say this study shows that this occurred and that occurred and that is the result. Okay? And then you break it up. All of these major findings, you devote an entire, what do you call it, paragraph. Okay? Acetaminophen showed this and this and this and that. So 4 major findings. And for each of these findings, you devote a paragraph. Okay? And the paragraph is exactly, the first line is, Okay, then go back to the opening paragraphs of the article. Are the research questions specifically stated and clearly stated? Is it clear what the authors want to find out? Do they make the case that this is an important area for research? Okay, this is important to find out, and you always make notes. Okay, so what I do is I underline with the highlighter the aim of a study. I underline the hypotheses of a study. These are the most important things, okay? And I underline the most important finding. Now, I should not underline the most important finding of a study if the most important finding of a study is in the title. But not all scientific papers write the most important finding in the title. So you must also find, sometimes you must look, where the most important finding is of this study. Okay, so the next section is usually a review of existing research literature on this topic. This is done in two ways, either again in the introduction or you write a review paper. Okay? So in the introduction you ask yourself, and you must also write it this way when you write a paper. Do you present a convincing line of argument here, or does it appear that you're just name dropping, for example? This is something that I find very often. Miller said this, and Smith said that, and Taylor said that, and Twining said that. So there is evidence that we all agree on the same subject. First of all, it's boring. Secondly, it could be wrong. Okay? So don't repeat something that has already been stated over and over and over again. It's better to say it differently. To say, for example, there is cumulative evidence that exercise prevents cardiovascular diseases, for example. Something like this, okay? In brackets, and then you put in 3 major findings of the statement that you make. Then you identify already the problems that are associated with that statement. Then you say, although there is some agreement on that, there's also problems associated, because we find people that are very active are still sick or become problems with their joints or something like this. Therefore, the statement, then the conclusion, therefore the statement, regular exercise prevents sickness, as such, cannot be substantiated by the literature. So this is something important that you underline. This is a little bit in line with the third point. Have the authors given sufficient attention to theory, the cumulative attempts at prior explanations for the questions they are investigating? So there is theory, okay, how things work, and this needs to be presented in the introduction or in a review paper. And extremely important, every paper must have a clear objective, aim, and my preferred papers are always when they test an hypothesis, especially in clinical studies. If you have a clinical study, you should have an expectation how things work. Not just that things will react, but you hypothesize how these things will react. What is the response of a certain treatment, for example? So they should be hypotheses driven. Yeah. In short, how well do the authors set the stage for the research problem? Okay. Now, once we have written and read the abstract, okay, we must then come to the methods and materials. The selection of methods by which the researchers collect data always involve compromises, and there are few studies that cannot be criticized for errors or omissions in terms of textbook criteria for research design and data collection procedures. You could focus on these questions here. For methods, do the authors clearly describe their research strategies? Okay? Are the research questions clearly set, and do they require a specific method? Or is the method that they produce not appropriate to answer the questions that they are asking? In the methods, you also should write the statistical analyses. Okay? For example, bone fracture. How do you measure bone fracture? Well, you're the expert, you should know. Is it X-ray? Is it MRI? Is it any other metrics? You name it, okay? And now how are we going to analyze that? So the methods must contain the statistical analyses. This must be very clearly written, and you must examine if the methods are suitable to answer the questions. Okay? And now we have got the section presenting results. This is very important. Present all results, not only those results that you would like to present. Okay? All the results need to be presented. If the results are not clear, present them. They are clear. It's just that you don't see them as you wish, perhaps. Okay? So results have undergone statistical analyses and must be presented as such. Does the results section tell a story, taking the reader from the research questions posed earlier to their answers in the data? Is the logic clear? Very important. Are the tables and figures clear and sufficient, actually, it should be. Can they be read easily for major findings by themselves, or do they need further explanation? This is a royal mistake that many authors do. If you look at a figure, the figure must be understood without reading the paper. The figure caption must have all information to understand the figure that you're presenting. Any regression, any data that are listed in a figure must be understood by looking at the figure and by reading the figure caption. Okay? Don't present data that are not clear. Make sort of that. If, for example, you see an insignificant relationship, it's a very blurry correlation. In fact, there is no correlation. You think there is a correlation, but there is none. Okay, it's a cloud, a data cloud that has no direction. You've got two ways to present that. Either You don't present it, which is in perhaps 90% of the case, because it's not important. It doesn't tell you anything. So you simply write in the results section that there was no correlation there was no significant relationship between that and that variable. And you say R square 0.02 and p-value of is larger than 0.5 or something. Okay? This is sufficient. Or you show no relationship, although everybody expects one. So if there's common knowledge that exercise increases health, but you show that increasing exercise doesn't do anything to health, this is absolutely new, okay? Then show that. People must see, because this is not expected. You're just about to perhaps to revolutionize what we think. What we think we know, okay? So that's something that you need to show. But in the figure caption, it should be written what we see. We don't need to go back to the text in order to understand what the figure shows. Okay? Yeah, that's basically what I've written here. And now we come to the last in a paper is the discussion section. This is where the authors interpret, discuss their generated results, and only that. I review papers quite a lot, and I've seen papers quite often that don't refer to the generated data themselves. They keep on bubbling about other studies, but don't interpret their own generated data. Okay? Your data need to be discussed, interpreted. This is what you start your discussion with. That's the punchline. And then you break it up and then you say, this is because we interpret it this way. And my interpretation is substantiated by other findings. Other findings are in line, although they investigated chimpanzees or donkeys or mice or other people, I don't know. So this lifts my understanding, my knowledge to a different level. It is not a case study anymore, it's general knowledge. This is how you juggle around with your knowledge. Your knowledge needs to be put into perspective. Okay? If it's unique, then you break through something that hasn't been known. If it is in line with other studies, then you say that. If it's conflicting with other studies, then you say it as well, and you discuss that. You say then, and this is allowed, and this is also important. You say, well, we are not sure. We have got this school of thought and that school of thought. We are leaning towards that school of thought, but we still don't know why these two schools of thought exist. My study or our study could not identify the reasons why there's a split between this or that way of thinking. Okay? Nobody expects that you revolutionize the world in one paper. It's great if you can. Then we see each other in Scandinavia when you get the Nobel Prize. But it's nobody that expects really that. Okay? Be honest to yourself, discuss what you think it is, and put that into perspective. The last point is, do the authors thoughtfully address the limitations of this study? I said before, there are studies in the morning I presented, there are studies that are limited by the design. okay? If you have got a cohort of 100 people, and these people are all between 30 and 35 years old and only women, that's the limitation. Either it's a specific limitation that you wanted to create because you were only interested in women between 30 and 35 years of age, or because of some other reason, okay? So don't overdo it. Don't say, oh, I've found my results are now applicable for the rest of the world. Nobody will buy that, okay? Say, this is the case, these are the limitations, and further studies are needed to test if my findings are also applicable for men the same age, or for women that are older or younger, and so on. So make clear that the limitations are also strengths. Okay? Don't mislead, don't misguide the reader. It's not like reviewers normally pick up on that, okay, and they would not allow you to publish that. But nobody is perfect, and some people let it pass. I don't think that you would like to be known as somebody who overdoes studies, you know, that exaggerates, that doesn't tell the entire truth. You know, that's not necessary. So these are the limitations. In general, it's important to close the study with conclusions. Why was it important that you performed this study? What did we learn because of this study? Okay, so you must not repeat what you've already said. A conclusion is not a summary. Important. A conclusion is not a summary. A conclusion tells what you haven't said in the discussion so far. So you put all of your discussions, all of your results into a certain perspective. Okay? You say, what did we learn now, in general? Good, so I will conclude now by summarizing something. Every paper is built according to an architecture. I call it the architecture of scientific writing. The most important finding, if you write a paper, try to put it in the title. Rather than saying implications of blah blah for that, okay, say already what the finding is. What's the most important result that you get in your paper? Say that. Then you write the abstract. The abstract is the last thing that you write. You first write the paper. In the introduction, you have this funnel technique. You come up with general statements, you break it down, you break it down, you break it down, and lead the reader to the problems that you identify, because research is about problem solving, scientific problem solving. Therefore, you've got a certain objective. So you write a clear objective, and if applicable and necessary, also test an hypothesis. So the objective of this paper is to, and you continue. Therefore, we test the hypothesis that, and you continue. We expect that this paper will provide further details, more information how things work, and you continue. Therefore, you need methods. You write up the methods, you include the statistical analyses, then you come to the results section. In the results section, you present all the results that have undergone statistical analyses, and then you interpret them. The first line of the discussion should be the punchline again, the most important finding. The first paragraph, you basically write what you found, and then you break it up point by point for every paragraph. The paragraph should be written with a general statement, discuss these general statements, provide substance to this general statement, and come up with a conclusion. And then you finish off a paper by a conclusion, which is not a summary. Put that into a broader perspective and tell why this study was important and what other studies could do. Okay? Based on your studies, you can suggest what other studies can do. Oh boy, that was, I think, very fast now, how to read a paper and how to write a paper. I normally do that over an entire semester, but we don't have this time. What I would like you now to do, please read, let's say until 3 o'clock, okay? The 3 papers. Maybe you can join up with people that have computers and read together. Read these 3 papers, and let's go back to these questions that I put up here, and I leave these questions on the screen. Take notes. Maybe you've got a notepad somewhere, and say what one paper was about, the second paper was about, and the third paper was about, and what basically answer these questions, and we can then talk about that. Okay, so I'll leave you at least until 3 o'clock. Are there any questions? It's all clear?